And we are live. Wasn't sure if we were actually going live. Had a little hiccup here with my program, but we are live. Thank you for tuning in for today's episode of the Pimpy and Rice Show. This is a collaboration between both of our YouTube channels, Rice Tvx, Pimpy's Investment Chat, and Hidden Things in Front of Your Eyes. Make sure you subscribe to both of our channels. Follow us both on LBRY and Odyssey. Today, we are joined by Lynette Zang once again for an economic roundtable discussion. And we're going to go ahead and get this show started in just moments. Pimpy's running a little bit behind, but he will be joining us as soon as he can pop in. So here we go. All right, now before we get started, I do have to always give a shout out to the sponsors of Rice Tvx. Shout out to Monarch and Presearch. I've got information down in the video description where you can check out their website and previous interviews I've done with their projects. So make sure you're checking that out. Also, I encourage people to make sure you're checking out my Patreon channel. It's a way to support my channel, support what I do. You get access to exclusive content. You also get early access to videos. And also, like I said before, me and Pimpy are both on LBRY and Odyssey. So make sure you're following us there. That's where we have backups of all of our videos and I post up extra content. If you would like to directly support or contribute to Rice Tvx, my PayPal, Cash App, and crypto addresses are in the video description, and any sort of donations, contributions would be greatly appreciated. So again, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Going to go ahead and pull Pimpy just joined the stream. So Pimpy, what is going on, my friend?
What is going on, my friend?
You've had a hectic morning, have you not?
Yeah, I went to go grab my youngest child, and so we had him flying from the airport, but talk about making it by a whisker.
literally, because you weren't sure, and we kind of delayed it, and I was hoping you would come in right with the intro. So we got Lynette. I'm just going to go ahead and pull her in a second. We've got a good solid hour with Lynette. So this will be the second time that me and Pimpy are joined by her. I've had Lynette on my show lots of times. I got a playlist down below in the video description with all of those previous appearances. So make sure you check those out if you have not, because there's a lot of valuable information in those conversations with Lynette. So Miss Lynette Zang, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm very good and very happy to be here.
I'm excited as always when I see you. Hi, Lynette.
Pleasure. Hi, Pimpy. It's good to see you.
That's what I was telling Lynette before you came on, Pimpy, and we were talking. I was asking, how much time she had, because I told her that if it was up to you, that you would probably do like a 24-hour live stream with her.
Yeah, we would be going for it, man.
so I always
a little more than I have as far as time goes.
Well, and so I know that Pimpy's got some questions. Before we get to the questions, the one thing I'd like to ask you is, where is your head at right now with everything that's going on currently in our financial economic climate?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking me, but
how are you feeling about what's going on in the markets and what's happening?
Oh, well, I definitely think we are in the melt up phase. And I also think that we have already backdoored introduced UBI, Universal Basic Income. So I expect it to continue, but yeah, I think this is the final blow off melt up phase.
Okay. I appreciate you sharing that. And again, I mean, you're such a wealth of information. If people aren't familiar with ITM trading, I got links down below so they can check out your channel if they're not already familiar. If you want to keep up with what's going on in the economic climate and what's happening in the stock markets, what's happening with gold and silver in general, Lynette is the person that you definitely need to be checking out. So Pimpy, I know you got some questions. How did you want to start off with the questions?
That's funny because every time before we get ready to talk to her, I say, okay, here's the questions. But then when I start to talk to her, they're all coming out at one time. I'm like, okay, organize them.
Well, I know you want to talk about 401ks and IRAs.
Yeah,
that could be a
401ks
quick
and
one.
IRAs. I was trying to explain to the subscribers how important it is to, I always recommend 25, 30% of the IRAs or portfolio or their 401ks protected by precious metals. And I'm trying to explain to them why it's important. And if I think back to 2008, I said, well, you know what? Lynette might be able to explain it better than I could. Why is it important for people to consider moving some or all of their 401ks or IRAs into precious metals?
Well, I'm glad that you asked me that because that's a great question. And typical investments in an IRA or a 401k are fiat money products, which means purely dollar based. And you can only convert them into dollars. And as I would think it's pretty obvious to everybody, but I'll also forgive me if I'm stating the obvious. The central bankers coming out and talking about, creating that inflation, which is really, they're telling you they are going to debase or devalue the currency. That's what that really means. Then in nominal terms, those accounts can go up, but in purchasing power and real value, they are going down. So in order to make sure that you actually have wealth that you can call upon in your retirement, you need real money. And I happen to just pull a couple of, really nice little raw libs. And then, of course, here's my tray of junk silver. This is all real money.
And that's some beautiful junk silver, though. I saw you going through and like showing some of the things that you've picked up, like little teaspoons and your salt and pepper shakers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're beautiful.
Sorry about the noise in the background. They're remodeling one of the rooms.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, Lynette, like where we live, I do that. Where I'll go by yard sales or even swap meets or flea market. It's crazy how people will be selling entire silverware sets for like $10. I'm like, man, there's way more silver value than just a set. And you'll grab all kinds of goodies that way. I have like a whole drawer full of junk silver like that. It's amazing how you can find such great deals that way. And I always tell people to go out and look for stuff like that. Coin hunting is another way for us because I'm also a newsbag, like coins. So I tell people, look, one of the things I used to do is grab 50-cent rolls and just go through them real quick and try to pull out all the silver. And that's a way to get, free silver. The universal basic income, which I'm not a fan. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Dimes and quarters as well.
Yes. For me, I always have better luck with 50-cent pieces. Which ones people miss the most? 1965 through 1970 is the ones that's missed the most. They forget it's 40% silver, and you'll find lots of those. People are getting really slick about it, so they're really good about picking out the real silver.
Well, since we're talking about silver, I mean, it'd be a good time to talk about what's happening in the silver market, the idea of the silver squeeze, what's happening with the price of physical silver. What are your thoughts on that, Lynette, as far as what's going on currently in the silver markets?
Well, I think that we are probably seeing a repeat of the 60s when they took the silver out of the coins and you actually had the president come on air and say that they would manipulate the price of silver down if you hoarded it. And so, anybody that's trying to create a short squeeze is really going up against the Bank for International Settlements and the IMF. Having said that, so that they can easily, that's why silver's at 26 and change today. Yes. It's ridiculous. It is such a bargain, even if you have to pay a big premium for it. Who cares? Still a huge bargain. Having said that, with the recent change in the SLV prospectus, which is really only about managing the price to imitate the spot price, the manipulated spot price of silver, but changing the prospectus to say that the price of SLV can have no direct relationship to the price of the spot market. And then I did a piece on that, and boy, I did not see it until I pulled way back and went all the way, actually even further back than when SLV first came out, where last summer, so I think it was June or July, where you saw a spike in SLV crossing above the spot market. And right? I mean, and you couldn't see it if you just looked short term. The only way that you could see it was by going back. So I believe, I can't prove this exactly, but I believe they knew that that happened, and that's why they had to get that prospectus changed, because it's going to get a whole lot bumpier. They cannot create the baskets because the physical silver to sell, because the physical silver is not there, but there's a whole lot of paper silver out there.
Yes. You know, I mean, I every chance I get, I keep telling people, look, don't fall for what you see as far as spot price is concerned. They're going to do everything they can to manipulate it. Back in the older days, they used to scare amateurs and speculators, and people get panicked and they sell. You know what I mean? That's how they're really good at that. But nowadays, people are more educated and they hold. They're not falling for that trick. I think we saw, what is it, that record amount of physical deliveries by the comics in February. I think it's 4 times what it was. So people are not trusting that the silver is going to be there. Now you add in the fact that we got the Green New Deal. Copper is it's up 3,500%. I mean, between copper and silver, those two metals I think are really going to skyrocket sooner or later. They can't keep holding them down. That's just my opinion.
But do not forget physical gold, because that's the key monetary metal. And that is the metal against which they reset ultimately the value of the currency.
Right.
Got to have that. You've got to.
Now, since you're mentioning gold, me and Pimpy were talking a little bit about things last night about what we were going to talk about today, because I knew we were going to be limited. And so I was like, what do you want to keep it down to? We were talking about the silver gold ratio as well. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the ratio as it stands now and where it could go?
Well, I think the ratio could, it actually collapsed. And I think that we could see that ratio with silver going up more than gold going up. I think we could see that continue to contract. But I will say that when I've done the studies on what happens during hyperinflation, you see that for a minute, but ultimately when we get in the thick of the hyperinflation, that ratio doesn't really hold. And gold significantly outperforms. And that's most likely because that's what they reset the currency against.
Right.
Yeah, I remember during the summer, I think it was in July. Remember, the ratio was ridiculous. I think it was like 127 to 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told people, start trading in your gold and start grabbing more silver. And I said, so if you had 10 ounces of, gold and you swapped it for silver at that time when the ratio was that big, and you did nothing else and you swapped it back today, you get twice as much gold if you think about it, because it's half the ratio right now. So that's how people, they keep accumulating, is those people who know what they're doing, they're really slick. They trade depending on the ratios, and that's another way to build your wealth.
Arbitrage, just arbitraging it.
Except what you're assuming is that it's always an easy trade back and forth.
Yeah,
and
I know.
And so I think it's dangerous. But I don't trade my gold. I don't trade I hold on to this gold for dear flippin' life, because this is what's going to put me in the absolute best position as we go through this whole thing to convert into income producing assets. You need too much of this.
Now, what is ITM selling like an ounce of silver for right now?
Well, I didn't check before I came on
With
air.
The premium, roughly.
Roughly $7.50, I think.
Okay.
A premium.
JVF Mastering was saying it's crazy. Silver premiums are $36 and gold at $19.10, which is a huge difference with the market price.
Exactly.
For the average person, though, when you explain that, like how do you try to translate that to somebody to have them understand how bad that is?
Well, what I would say to somebody is they can create an unlimited amount of paper. And in fact, before they changed how they accounted for it, for every 1 ounce of physical gold that exists, there were 60, according to the Bank for International Settlements, 62,000 ounces of paper gold.
Yeah, crazy.
Okay,
It's
so
crazy.
that's how you explain it. Of this, there's a finite amount.
Right.
Of this, there's a finite amount. But of the paper, there's an unlimited amount. But shields are made of this, of metal. They are not financial shields. They are not made of paper, and they are certainly not made of promises. So that's
why I tell people you got to physically have it. You got to have it in your possession. If you don't have it, you don't own it. If you're trusting, you know, the one where you can trade in your shares for physical silver, that means you're banking that they'll actually give it to you, or that it'll actually be there once you trade it in, which is pretty risky. I'd rather have it in my possession. I noticed that the gold was going down, and I noticed that the 10-year yield was affecting the gold market. Am I right in that assumption?
Well, you know, the 10-year yield breached that 1.5. It closed a couple days ago at 1.54. And you've got the yield on the S&P 500, the average yield, at 1.57. So, you know, is the yield going to impact the, you know, where you hear my hesitancy? It's like, I was part of Wall Street. I know their gimmicks. I read about it all the time. I know what garbage it is. So I don't trust anything that I see out of Wall Street because it's all manipulation. Right. And the 10-year yield, you know, they're telling you that the yield is going up because of the growth, because they have given so much free money, and, you know, they're going to do more stimulus, obviously, the start of UBI.
Yeah.
To get
a great reset.
To get the consumers to consume, and look at how great the growth is. But you also have to look at the growth in the debt. I mean, does anybody really think that that does not matter? Because I think they need to go to a shrinky dink.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it matters.
The debt is definitely getting out of hand. And, you know, at some point you've got to wonder, like, when is all this going to collapse? And when Pimpy was mentioning the COMEX and physical deliveries, I mean, when you see a lot more of that stuff happening and more of these GameStop opportunities happening, it's really giving a lot of disclosure to the public as to how the stonks work. And it, you know, to see how manipulated everything is. And you would think like events like 2008 would have really woken people up.
No, because they papered over it.
Right.
So, you know, you paper over it, but the problem is their balance sheet is a whole lot bigger today than it was in 2008. And it doesn't matter if you're a government, a corporation, or an individual. Yeah, they can stretch things up here because they can create the money, but they cannot override, you know, the natural laws. They just can't. So I think what we're seeing is a great breakdown. And that's why I think that this is the last great melt up that we've started to enter.
One of your first videos I saw that you did, you were showing the history throughout time of when the markets were crashing, how they were being, it looked like artificially pushed up. Precious metals were brought down, and the so-called elites were grabbing all the metals while they were cheap, and then just let the market crash. It wiped out everybody of their money unless you had precious metals. And that's what I try to tell people. In 2008, your 401ks, your IRAs, what happened to them? A lot of people lost everything if you didn't have precious metals. That's why I stress to people, look, if you have 401ks, you have IRAs, you know, if you're too scared to convert it all, at least think about doing 25-30% of it. You know, this way then you're protecting yourself against a crash is really what I'm trying to emphasize to people.
Well, I agree with you 100%, Pimpy. And, you know, you made a really good point, because if you don't hold it, you don't own it. You know, then it's under a contract and nobody ever bothers to read the fine print. That's why they're this thick, is really to deter you from actually reading and seeing what you're agreeing to. And we all, you know, we all
do that.
We all do it. I mean, let's face it. But you're right.
I was trying to explain to people what a bail-in is. I did a video a long time ago saying lessons from Cyprus, and I wanted people to learn from this. And I told them, look, the bail-in and the BIS made it, for all banks now, that the bail-in, if at any time, when you put your money in a bank, I tell people, you literally just gave them your money. It tells you right there that you no longer own it and that the banks own it to do whatever they please with it. So for me, I don't even keep my money in the bank. It's all in precious metals. I keep enough to pay my bills monthly. And then in my safe, I have like 6 months worth of expenses plus 10% for miscellaneous. But I don't trust the banks. And now we're listening to BIS talk about bail-ins again. So I'm trying to tell people, look, I know this sounds scary, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. I just don't trust the banks. I was wondering about your impressions on that.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. And also what I would also add to that, because I have this data where you can see the normal person, the man on the street, they just put their money in the bank and we're considered sticky because we don't go and rush and take it out. And you could see the investors when Cyprus became part of the Euro experiment, right? You could see the other countries going in and buying up the bonds, putting the money into the banking system there because they were getting a lot higher rates. And then you also saw them rapidly remove it so that the timing of this bail-in was very planned.
Yes.
And so who stayed in there? The normal mom and pop stayed in there because they just couldn't believe it. And of course, there's deposit insurance. So when you're referring to that Biz article or the Biz paper that came out on the bail-in, what I found really interesting were the two graphs in particular in there that showed what it would look like if they did not honor the deposit insurance scheme. They call it a scheme. They're right? And the other one, how it would work if they did honor the deposit insurance scheme. It happens over a weekend. I thought it was interesting that they put the one where they did not honor it first. Because they can't if all the banks collapse at the same time. In 2008, according to the FDIC, they were one small bank failure away from everybody realizing that the emperor had no clothes.
Wow.
One small bank away.
That is insane to think about.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, if we look at how much money is in the kitty for the FDIC, I don't think there's enough to cover everybody.
No, there's not. It would bankrupt.
Is it the derivatives?
It would bankrupt the country 100%. There's no way the FDIC could cover it all.
Even in, I did something on the diff, not just recently, but I'm pretty sure it hasn't changed too much. They have like a penny for every dollar's worth of insured deposits. And then if you have above that, well, then that just gets bailed in and too bad, so sad. But yeah, a penny.
So Lynette,
yeah, on that video, that lady she said we had $6 million in the bank. She goes, we got paid, and I think their FDIC amount was something like $150,000 out of the $6 million. And she goes, to add injury to insult, they charged a 6% tax on the FDIC insurance. I was like, man,
that is crazy. So I wanted to highlight this question real quick. Litecoin Lisa, she's another content creator that me and Pep has worked with. She was asking, can you ask Lynette how recent bond failure will affect the banks, and could she see a banking holiday coming soon potentially? And I guess with that, I'd like to talk about the bond yields with the treasury bonds as well. But as far as this recent bond failure and how it'll affect the banks and whether or not.
Yeah, it's been a bubble for a little while now.
Are you talking about the 7-year bond auction that they just did that was a big fail?
It was a big fail.
It was a big fail.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Rick Santelli gave them a D- on that. But yeah, and actually, let's kind of back up for a second on that, because the central bank has absolutely committed to maintaining their bond purchases. So it doesn't mean that this is not failing. I mean, they started buying treasury bonds in December. I believe it was December 13th. Don't hold me to this, but I'm pretty sure it was December 13th of 2002. That's when they first had to buy bonds from our government because there were not enough buyers out there.
Yeah.
So, the other point that I would like to make, and then we'll come back to the bonds, is that last year when this crisis, when the COVID crisis first erupted, what'd they do? Look at how much cash has been printed. Something
I think it's like 20% of the money supply.
I think it's worse than that.
It might be. I mean, I might be
worse.
going low, but still 20% of the money supply being printed in 1 year, considering that's our entire money supply, that should worry people, because we haven't even felt the pains from this.
Oh, no, not even. No, they're giving this fiat money away so that it stimulates the economy. It really stimulates the markets more than anything else. But take a look at that, because there was a bank run last March. And then you had all these central bankers march out and say, hey, well, we can just print as much money as we want. This is really not a problem. And
that's when the FDIC did their little commercials and stuff, letting everybody know that their money was safe.
Exactly.
Well, people protected by GESARA accounts, Lynette, you know how they have this where they go in and deposit your, like you have $1 million, if the limit's 250,000, they spread it out over 5. Are GESARA accounts protected? Because if I'm not mistaken, something's been changed that you're not protected anymore.
I can't answer that.
Okay.
But would you make a note of that? I'll take a look at it. But what I can,
yeah, they used to be really slick about keeping the amount just below the insured amounts in multiple accounts, so that if a bail-in does happen. But again, that's banking on, you're assuming the FDIC is going to be able to cover it. So now I don't have any confidence in that whatsoever.
But here's the thing. What really is the big deal, and what is the cost to push a button and create as much fiat money as you want? I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
This, you can't do that with. There's a finite amount. There's a finite amount. This gets used up in manufacturing. This doesn't. This is recoverable, right? But this is finite. That pushing that button and creating money, I mean, so how protected are you? You may get that nominal amount back, but how much can that buy you?
Right.
What it's worth versus value. I try to tell that to people all the time. There's a big difference between value and worth. And I went on to use an example of, back when gold was $25 an ounce, the cost of a house was $3,500. So 175 ounces to buy the house. If you never did anything but kept that same 175 ounces today, you still could buy the house with that same 175 ounces.
Exactly.
So that's what I'm talking about, carrying its worth with it.
Exactly.
Well, it's like, I guess the reference of in 1920 with an ounce of gold, you could have bought a really nice suit. And today you can still buy a really nice suit.
So I just did this the other day. This is something I refer back to, since you were talking about the house, is salary, right? Because what people don't really understand, it's been trained out of us, is that we get paid for our labor in these fiat dollars that by design lose value through inflation, right? Mm-hmm. And so the average salary was $9,500 in 1971, which equated to, I don't remember how many ounces of gold at $42.22, which is the official U.S. price of gold. If you did not get a raise, pardon?
227 ounces?
That sounds about right. If you did not get a raise, but you were just paid in the same amount of gold, the day that the average price of spot in 2020, it would have been something like $365,000. Well, then you wouldn't have qualified for the, stimulus checks. But hey, they just changed the child tax credit, so you can go up to $400,000 in a married couple and still qualify for it. I mean, what does that tell you?
Yeah, you did that example, and I remember talking about that. I said, look, Lynette points this out, the $9,000 or $9,500 for the salary for 1 year. If you just took that 1 year and you did nothing else and converted it all into gold at that value at the time, I think it was 42 ounces or $22 for gold. And I go, and look, so you have like 227 ounces of gold. If all you did is that one, you still have a pretty good sized nest egg to retire on today. Now, can you imagine if you did 2 years, 3 years worth of salary, all just in specifically just in gold? Of course, hindsight, 50-50, but I'm just saying, that's why you should think about it now, because 20 years from now or so, people are going to go, wow, back in 2020, if you'd have done this, they're going to do the same thing. So now's the time to do it.
I have a feeling that it's not going to take 20 years for people to go, oh, I wish I had done that. Because if this is indeed the final melt up, and we can see governments all around the world are rushing to come out with their CBDCs, their central bank digital currencies, that are selectively anonymous, which means they can see every single transaction, they can tax every transaction. They're working through and finalizing a lot of the legalities so they can charge, they'll say pay or charge interest, because they may pay you to begin with just to get you used to it, right? And that before they go negative. But, we could see negative rates in this country anytime now, quite honestly. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing I don't like about that digital. I had to be laughing because you were talking about talk about time. And here's Powell's, and they're talking about how, we got this digital currency and then a Federal Reserve power go out. And I go, this is an example why I don't like cryptocurrencies or anything, because if the power's out, how do you get to your money? I'll take cryptocurrencies that I can convert into my physical, whatever the currency is at the place, but I certainly want to go digital 100%. That gives the government way too much power, man, way too much, and I don't trust them at all.
Well, I do want to talk about the Federal Reserve and what happened in the digital currencies. Did we skip over the bond yield stuff?
We might have skipped over the bond yield stuff. Okay, so
do you mind kind of if we could touch on that and then get on the Federal Reserve and digital currencies, and then I'd even like to ask you later about your thoughts with what Tesla, MicroStrategy are doing with hedging against the dollar with things like Bitcoin as well.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think that the Federal Reserve will just buy more bonds because they've absolutely stated whatever it takes to suppress the bond yields. And, if the yield on the 10-year goes above that 1.57, which is the average yield on the S&P, then they're going to have a whole lot harder time supporting the stock market. So I just think they will continue to buy like they started in 2002. And then anytime the yields got away from them, they just throw more fiat at it, buy more bonds to suppress it and control the whole yield curve.
Yeah. I heard Gregory Mannarino talking about how the Fed's really controlling the 10-year yield curve very, very tightly too. So
absolutely.
I think they just know that the fiat is so worthless. Now they're at a stage right now where they're like, you know what? Who cares? Just start buying up all things. What I don't like is like BlackRock going around buying all assets. People like Bill Gates buying up all our farmland. Now the government in California is allowed to buy assets. I guess it used to be illegal. Now you have Gavin Newsom's passing a law saying that, you can't sell properties in bundles, but the government has first right of refusal on non-family units. And I'm like, you get back to the Great Reset where it says you'll own nothing
and you'll be happy.
Yeah, no, you can see they're already pushing people into this, whether you like it or not. So is there a chance to stand up against that, in your opinion?
This is how you stand up against it. And if more people are really you do it with your pocketbook, you vote with your purse or with your wallet.
Right. We call them MERS. No, it's kidding.
MERS. Our man purses.
Yeah, man purse, MERS.
That's okay. I mean, we're all just whoever we are anyway. But, that's how you stand up. And if enough of us do that, that makes a difference. If enough of us know, and look, what they do in China, they're giving away the digital yuan.
Yep. Right? People into it.
Exactly. And so they've already been going and getting a lot more control of their population. I mean, they're really leading the way. That scares the beans out of me because you know, the whole world. I mean, this is where the whole world is going, is what China is doing to their population, which is absolute control. Absolute control.
Yeah.
And that's
social scoring. Yeah.
Central banks. If we go to the digital currency and that's all you have, because they have to get rid of the cash. And look what's happening.
I mean, we've said this before. I'm not as much as I love cryptocurrency, I am not at all, you know, for going all digital. We need to have physical things, at least barter abilities and gold and silver and things like that. Because if you look at what happened in Texas as an example, with the power outage and stuff, how can I use my digital currencies if I have no power?
Exactly.
So that, you know, that's the only problem when it comes to digital currencies and cryptocurrencies, is that if they were able to kill switch the internet, then it's done.
Aren't they doing that in China?
Yeah,
right? They're doing it right now in China because of how much energy these cryptocurrencies. Well, that's the excuse anyway.
Well, China's got more than 51% of the mining. So in a way, they have a little bit of kind of control over things when it comes to Bitcoin. So, I mean, that's one of the things that they are trying to work on in the United States. In Texas, again, they're building a big, huge mining facility. You've seen Tesla move there. They're involved in the energy aspects. So I think trying to come up with better forms of energy to be utilized to mine these things. And also when you look at it from a competitive level from nations and stuff like that, China's got the, you know, they're leading the way, like you said. So the United States really needs to do something to step up, or it's going to fall behind. And I think that there's some things that are being done proactively with that. But what are your thoughts with what happened with the Fed and them having their issues for several hours of the system basically being shut down or something to that effect? Do you think it was BS?
No, I don't think it would. No, I think they just don't have as much control and clarity as they want you to think. So, you know, look at that. That was all the payment systems. So if you're on ACH, like we use ACH because I have employees and that's how I pay them, right? So, and that's how a lot of bills get paid. And they were down for several hours, which really would have screwed a lot of things up. I think, and on top of that, remember the hack on SolarWinds?
Yes.
That went to all these government agencies?
Yeah.
I mean, hello.
And you're supposed to feel really secure about these CBDCs. You know what I mean? It's like,
exactly. But, you know, I also wanted to make a point since you brought up Texas. And that is, it's not just gold and silver. You need to be prepared and be as independent and self-sufficient as you can possibly be, because people are dying there because they don't have food, they don't have energy, they don't have water, they don't have the means to sustain themselves while their power is out. So it may be this reason, or it may be, you know, you think about a year ago, March and April, when this whole COVID pandemic hit and the grocery store shelves were bare.
oh yeah.
And, you know, the importance of food, water, energy, security, community, shelter, barterability, wealth preservation. I mean, it's a whole ball of wax. It's not just this. You need to have, you know, a way to generate food and heat your water and cook it.
Like turning your swimming pool into a garden.
Well, yes. And it looks so good right now because it's spring here in Arizona. And so I was just out this morning and just looking at the mulberries coming about and all the flowers on my peach tree. Oh, it's just getting so gorgeous here now.
Lynette, awesome. Did you notice that when we first started going into the Rona, I don't know if it was the governor of Minnesota or Michigan, one of them, I think, tried to outlaw buying seeds for food. I thought, what the hell is that about? They really want that kind of control. They don't want people to be, I never heard. I think the more we start going down this path, the more you're starting to see just how, in my opinion, evil these people are. No praying, no church, no buying seeds for food. You know, push us into this Green New Deal, in which it obviously doesn't work. You know, you're trying to get together with family. They're arresting people over it. And why is it that 537 people that control our government are able to control 327 million people like it's nothing? I can't figure that out. But we tolerate it. We just let it
Jumping in
happen.
the water, my friend. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I mean. I'm trying to help wake people up because we're on that cusp. If people don't really, again, that's where I'm going into that. We really need to take a stand. People need to become united and put the government in check.
Oh, they're going for the guns because that's the last final stage right there. They know as long as these guns are out here, then there's still a fighting chance.
That's what Frank
I'm waiting for the biggest.
Frank Sabini said mass shooting, then a UN gun grab. We all know the plan.
Yeah. A false flag, the biggest false flag. I said this is coming up, and they're going to try to use it. Insurgencies, those evil Trump supporters. I can already see it now. They're already trying to set the stage. That's what that was all about. I mean, we were there in D.C. on January the 6th.
Wow.
Yeah, we got to meet each other in
Trump
person.
really wanted something to happen. He had like 3.5 million people. Trust me, if Trump said do it, they would have tore that building apart, and nothing would have been able to stop them.
There was a lot of people out there, Lynette.
Yeah, it was
crazy.
crazy.
And I didn't go there in support of Trump. I just went there in support of our nation. And it was really beautiful seeing all the people that showed up. It was
more
so
spiritual
peaceful
for me than it was about politics or
so
Trump.
peaceful.
I love Trump, but yeah.
When me and Pimpy met each other, like physically got together, it was like right as apparently the breach of the Capitol building was happening. We were on the right in front of the Capitol building, and we had no clue what was going on. Like they're singing Christian
until the emergency thing started coming over, I think. And remember, we were questioning it. So you get the emergency alert. It would say, what did it say? Trump supporters are. I'm like, what? Why would they say it like that?
Yeah.
Why would they say there's individuals breaching this? And then it said Nancy Pelosi's office has been infiltrated by Trump supporters. I was like, that's weird to word it that way on these emergency broadcasters. In my opinion, they were trying to set a stage. Is what they were doing.
This is an interesting time in history. I mean, it's the most bizarre thing. I think most people can agree that I don't think anything at this point would really surprise people anymore. Aliens can come down. I think people are conditioned enough to where it's not going to freak everybody out that much.
I hope you're right, but
you might see the UFOs in Arizona. I don't know.
Yeah, but I know too many people that really still don't realize that there's anything going on. Like everything seems kind of normal because, hey, they've made more money. So they're not in that 10% of the people that are not making any money, that have lost their jobs. And, it looks more normal when you go out on the street. It kind of appears to be normal. So unfortunately, I do think there are going to be, I think I even know some of those people that will be surprised because I don't, look, if you want to talk to me about it, you can ask me questions and I will talk to you about it. But I am not one to try and cram anything down anyone's throat.
Yep,
you can't. You can lead a horse to water.
Do you own anything else besides gold and silver? I mean, do you buy like copper or anything like that? Are you into those other metals?
I don't do any other metals because for me, this is a currency reset. And so I focus on the currency metals. But I will say that I do have my personal plan, which I've been working on for a very long time. Finally, all in place. Now, that doesn't mean that I will ever feel like I have enough.
Right.
But,
it's because you think about your family, you think about your children, your grandchildren, you're not thinking even about yourself. I don't feel like with any of this because I know how you've been in your community, helping people. You were the toilet paper lady for a while, helping everybody out. Giving people vegetables.
No, that's how she got that little goodie bowl there full of silver. She was swapping it for toilet paper. Look at her. Look at. Let's go to Auntie Lynette's house. Get the candy from that jar for Dad, would you?
There you go. Well, you won't get candy here, but there is lots of good, yummy food, healthy food, and we do give that away. And actually, I'm really excited because I really adopted Children's First Leadership Academy, which is actually a homeless school here near, not too far from where I am. And so we try and do something wonderful, every month, and in January, we bought everybody blankets. I should have thought of that sooner. But we went in and there's an area in the school that we rehabbed for garden beds. And coming up, I guess next Wednesday? It's tomorrow. Okay, so tomorrow we're going in to provide the plants, teach the kids how to plant. We're planting in some food trees as well. We have space for 3 food trees. So we're doing a peach. What are we doing? We're doing what are we doing? Oh, the cutie, the little orange cuties, because that's easy for kids to peel. And then the mulberries, because that's the first producer. So, you know, yeah, I mean,
I think we don't do enough of that in schools. I mean, stuff like that, like life
right.
skills, you know, planting, gardening, welding. We just got away from that, and it's
Yeah, people don't. I mean, if you had to tell some
control the food.
Most gentlemen, if you tell most men, like, go survive in the woods, I would even say myself, like, I'm not exactly equipped for that. I might be able to figure out a way of getting, you know, being all right, but it's not something I'm trained for. And I think that it's crazy when you think about how we've gotten away from being self-sufficient and become so reliant. And even with everything that's been going on, people are still reliant. They're not becoming as self-sufficient as you would think.
Exactly. And that's the scary part. And that goes back to what's happening in Texas. Because if all of those people had, you know, everything to make sure that they could keep their electricity going, you know, generators or whatever it is, then
they would be in a lot better position.
Exactly. And they would have also been in a position to help others.
Yeah, you know, I don't, you know, not to bring his name up, but I was watching Chris Marcus. You know, he was there and he was freezing. This poor guy. He's up in the middle of the night walking in the streets, just mad about how cold it was. And he made perfectly good sense. What he pointed out is kind of disturbing. The fact that you could go downtown and these buildings have their lights on, their signs on. Meanwhile, there's people with no electricity. So how do they got the power to put on these big signs and their office lights? But meanwhile, there's people freezing to death, literally freezing to death in these houses. And I was like, man, he's making a good point. He really was. And so
and also, if you look at what happened to the cost of electricity, because all this extra money that the Fed has created to slosh around in the system and all the speculation that's happening. And so, you know, again, I can't prove this, but I think that a lot of people went without electricity because of that spike of something like 4,000% or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, it went up from like $4 to $400 or something like that.
I think it was higher than $400.
Okay.
It was something like, for a minute, I have it on a slide, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. But I think it was something like 48,000. It was beyond ridiculous. And, you know, kind of something similar happened in California with those guys that were manipulating the price of electricity there.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, for us, we had some of the biggest fires, and here was the point that Trump was trying to make about these, you know, with Gavin Newsom. Instead of using the money like they're supposed to do like maintenance in the forest, they do these, what do you call them, controlled burns. Mm-hmm. So they didn't. Instead, they paid out more dividends to the people who were invested in, of course, not to keep, you know, not the conspiracy thing, but you got a Rothschild that's on the board. You know what I mean? Of course, they wanted to pay out the dividends. And look what happened. We had like 5 years of the worst fires we've ever had. The rim fire was right here in my back door. The heat, we were miles away, and you could feel the heat off these flames. It was ridiculous. But again, these are just people more focused on, you know, their shareholders than they were doing what's right for the people. And it's just unfortunate. And then they turn around and they go, oh, don't turn around and pass the buck off on to people. And they're like, we won't. And then what do? They raise the rates on everything.
Well, of course. And think about it. It's they're doing the same thing with the banks. Oh, the banks are so healthy. Well, I guess they don't read their own work, because they all, in a recent Fed report, said that the banks were really like one crisis away from being insolvent. But hey, let them go ahead. Now that look at suddenly this week they're insolvent and this week they're really healthy, so they can pay out those dividends. And once those dividends get paid out, they don't come back in a crisis. They're gone.
Right.
They're gone.
I agree.
And then it's the little guy that eats it.
What do you think about when I mentioned earlier about the idea of like what Elon Musk and Tesla did with purchasing $1.5 billion in Bitcoin? You see MicroStrategy, they're continuing to buy. I think they've even put out some sort of, not sure what it's called, but they're creating where they're getting money by putting out some sort of bond, I guess, in some sense, and they're using that to purchase more Bitcoin. And then you see PayPal, Cash App, and what they're doing. You're seeing more than the actual mine supply of Bitcoin daily being purchased up by these entities. Now you're seeing companies putting it on their asset sheets. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know you're not a huge proponent of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So I'm just curious what you think with them going that route, as opposed to, because I mean, I know that Elon had mentioned things about gold ETFs and it was all paper related, but they're not buying gold and silver, they're buying cryptocurrency. And I'd kind of like to get your thoughts on it.
Well, I have a couple thoughts on it. Number one, since Elon really does produce the best battery in the world, then he is probably thinking that he will be able to continue to mine Bitcoin because of all the electricity that it holds. But at the same time, even though he's not saying that, he needs silver to produce those batteries. So I think that he wants to buy it as cheap as possible and get his hands on as much as possible, and control Bitcoin. But I think
artificially pump it keeps people away from the precious metals. They get a rush off of the jump in value. I always go, what the hell is supporting this value? I don't get it. It's just like fiat currency. But you know what it is? It's just purely speculative driven. And when you see people dropping that kind of money in it, just like you said, I think what they're doing is trying to steer people away from the precious metals. Price goes down, they're buying it up. People are jumping on the cryptocurrency. And then we just seen it took a huge dive recently. And now all of a sudden, magically, it's going back up again. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what it does. It's constant, just like most stock markets. I mean, it's going and it's testing its support and resistance. And once it gets to a level, it starts to go up and then it retraces back down. And a 20-30% retracement is very typical and normal. It's not for the stock markets and for finance 1.0, but in the cryptocurrency space, it's nothing that alarms most people who've been in the space for a while.
Well, right, because what they're really doing is creating a brand new market as a brand new product. January 2009. I personally do not think it was a coincidence that it came out in 2009 and in March of 2009, they started QE. I don't think any of that is a coincidence, but I also do think that it gets a lot of eyeballs, even when it's as volatile as it is. And then the governments can come out and say, well, here's our CBDC and we're controlling it so you can feel more comfortable with it. But I think it's all a setup to make that transition. And what we don't know yet is what governments, I mean, there is room on the money flower from the biz.
I remember that.
Private, right? For private cryptocurrencies. It's a small little area, so we don't really know who's going to survive. Maybe it will be Bitcoin because Bitcoin does appear to have the backing of large players like Elon, though $1.5 billion is basically chump change. It's not really a lot that he put into it. However, if there is indeed a limited amount of them and he can own a big chunk of it and then manage it.
Yes.
But I'll bet you anything he's also buying a ton of silver.
I don't know if you've, I would agree. And I don't know if you've seen it, but George Gammon did a really good video, one of his whiteboard videos, talking about like these companies putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets. Cause he was like trying to use the example of if he put Bitcoin on his balance sheet for his YouTube channel, it's not going to affect his YouTube channel. It's not going to get him any more views or anything like that. But yet MicroStrategy, if you look at them, they've been on a multi-year downtrend and then they invest into Bitcoin. Now all of a sudden it's gone up like crazy. And it's all just because they bought an asset. Even Tesla, it's crazy to think that they may have profited more in a quarter buying Bitcoin than actually selling cars.
$1 billion.
Well, Tesla has only recently become profitable.
I know. Very, very barely. I think like it was a very minimal profit in 2020. It wasn't anything to brag about when you look at how much.
Right.
And that was, for me going to school for business administration, it was very confusing to me. How can everybody say that Tesla is such a forward thinking business and all these people are investing in the company, but it's yet never pull it a profit.
Right.
That didn't really compute with me at all. I'm like, how does this work? I mean, I know it was kind of banking on the future more than the present, but
it's easy. You give money for free, lots and lots and lots of money. Then you get to speculate. You know, same thing with Amazon. I mean, how many years did Wall Street support Amazon and its destruction of the mom and pop shops for what, 10, 12 years before it was profitable? I mean, right. Look at all of these zombie companies that for at least 3 years do not even earn enough money to pay the interest on their debt, let alone any of the principal.
Well, GameStop was kind of in that position in a way.
Yes, they were.
And then now we see what happened, and now it's like that was a crazy situation too. I mean, that was just absolutely insane.
True.
I know that we're getting down to the hour point.
Wow, that went fast.
It did.
It always does, yeah.
I think we covered a lot of good ground. What I always like to do, I guess before I hand it over to you and get to tell everybody what you do with ITM trading and what ITM can offer people, do you have any last question, Pimpy, for Lynette before we let her do her thing and we wrap up?
Absolutely. Super quick here. Lynette, knowing everything that we see happening right now, we see all these bubbles getting ready to burst. We see these artificial pumping of the economy, in my opinion, artificial pumping of these cryptocurrencies.
I agree.
With where precious metals, especially gold and silver, are right now, what, in your opinion, for those people straddling on the border with their 401ks and their IRAs, or even considering buying it, but they're worried about the premiums, how important, where are we at right now, in your opinion? How important is it right now for people to start, if you haven't done it yet, right now to start doing something?
Honest to goodness, it is critically important. And when you're looking at the premiums, you need to also look at, well, what's its true value? What is the true value of an ounce of gold or an ounce of silver? Far above an ounce of gold is at least minimum, and I should crunch the numbers again to be more accurate, but easily over $12,000, $13,000 an ounce, and silver over $600, $700 an ounce. So what is that little teeny premium? Big deal if you pay $35 or $36 for an ounce of silver, or $1,900 or $2,000 for an ounce of gold. Big deal. It's on sale, and it's critically important that you start to accumulate while you can still get your hands on it, which is why I don't trade back and forth, because I don't know how long I'm going to have all my options. And I got news for you. The options that you do have in both gold and silver are more limited today than they were in 2008 or 3 years ago or even a year ago.
Yeah.
Right?
It's really scarce. It's starting to become more and more scarce. The move on the comics just confirmed, in my opinion, that we are way shorter than they're letting us know. And I think it's short across the board. Gold, silver, platinum, palladium, rhodium, all of them are just scarce. And they're trying to shake speculators, and I don't think it's working. People are holding, and I say buy, buy, buy.
I echo that. Buy, buy, buy. Because this is what's going to save your financial future, especially if you're sitting in those 401ks or 403bs that you cannot do anything with. And I would also say, you can't do this with a 403b. I mean, you better have enough gold to balance that out. So when that does go to zero, you've got the gold that goes up. I mean, it's like this. Right now, stocks are here, gold is here. It'll flip-flop. So you've got to have that to have a truly diversified portfolio. And silver too. I like them both. I own them both. I own them for different functions because I'm a strategist. I'm not a short-term trader. That's not my thing. But I am a long-term strategist, and I don't care if I'm 10 years too early. I'd much rather be that than 1 second too late. Because that's the piece that people don't realize. It's your loss of choice. You think you have choices, You walk into the grocery store, you think you got thousands of choices? No. 6 companies own everything. So they just give you that semblance of choice. The same thing with the money, except it's much more narrow than that. You know, you've got a government that's controlling the fiat money. This is real money. Gold and silver, real money. And that has been true for what, 5,000-6,000 years? And you don't need a government to say it, because both of these, I mean, Elon needs these sterling silver chopsticks to build his batteries.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, the silver is a big component to what Tesla does.
Huge. So I'm pretty sure he's stockpiling silver as well.
Yep,
I'm pretty sure he is.
Yeah, I would agree. But it's obviously they made a big deal about the Bitcoin thing because, yeah, I mean, they are trying to push people to a digital direction because, I mean, if they can have digital ID, digital currency, I mean, there's not really much you can't do without asking for permission.
Yeah.
You know, it's and basically
you can vote without it.
You go into, you look at the Chinese social credit system and all that, and you watch like on Netflix, your Black Mirror series. I don't know if you've ever seen Black Mirror, Lynette, but if you have,
yes,
you should check out Black Mirror on Netflix. It's like, it's like a very modern version of the Twilight Zone.
Oh.
Well, it's more like telling you what the future, what it's going to do in the future. It has this way of, you see it and you go, oh, that's interesting. And then all of a sudden next year, it's real life. You're like, wow, okay, robot dogs, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. The social scoring one. They have this one, Lynette, on there about a lady trying to build up her social score high enough so she can go be with all her little rich friends. And these weird series of events keep knocking her score down. It's a great show. It's really good.
It's really, it's what I'm saying. You might enjoy it because it's kind of like giving people indications of what could happen. And I think that if people are aware of these things, maybe we can try to prevent these type of futures from taking place.
I hope so.
Yeah, you hope so. Yeah, exactly.
Because, and especially, you know, you mentioned it before, it's my children, it's my grandchildren. I mean, you know, I am 66. I figure I'm going to be around till I'm about 100 or so. I think I'm going to make it that far, but my children are going to be here. My grandchildren are going to be here a lot later. And yeah, I do not like the Great Reset. You own nothing and you'll be happy. You own nothing. You do not own your life.
Yeah, you have. I mean, freedom is part of being a human being, and if you're put in a cage that you just can't see, it limits life. And you know, it's
you're being tested right now. Look at this. Is this lockdowns? They want to see how far they could push you. It's just ridiculous, and people are conforming to it. They're already used to it.
Yeah,
already.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
they're definitely getting used to doing what they're told, even if they don't really agree with it or question it. They still do
one
it.
mask, 2 masks, 3 masks. I mean, that's ridiculous.
1 mask, 2 mask, 3 mask, 4. All right. So Lynette, we always appreciate your time. I want to go ahead and hand it over to you and let you explain to everybody what you do at ITM Trading and what ITM Trading can do to offer people who are looking to buy gold and silver and various precious metals.
Okay, Chris. Well, what I do there is I'm the chief market analyst. So I'm constantly paying attention to everything. I can't see everything, but I certainly do try. And I've been studying currencies since 1987, and there are repeatable patterns. So I actually developed a strategy for myself before I even got to ITM based upon those repeatable patterns. But, you know, I've been at ITM since 2002. And everybody there, pretty much everybody there, has been there for a really long time. So we're all executing and making the strategy that the foundation of which I created, better and better. And that's what we really like to do there, is help people create that strategy so they can walk through this mess and be better off on the other side. And yes, indeed, gold and silver are the foundation of the strategy, because you need real money going into this. So that's what we love to do, is really help people we customize it, because obviously my circumstances are going to be different and my goals will be, and what I have to work with is going to be different than somebody else. So we do those customized strategies.
Love it. Can't hear you, Chris.
I just realized I muted myself, and what I was going to say is,
I was like a dead air. I was like, something's wrong. I see Chris's mouth moving, but I don't hear anything.
I definitely encourage people to check out ITM Trading's YouTube channel, because Lynette's doing a lot of live streams that she does with Eric, and then
I know I sent him over and say, "Tell Pimpy sent you."
So again, Lynette, we really appreciate your time. I'm going to ask everybody, if you haven't already subscribed to all of our channels, make sure you subscribe. Rice Tvx, Pimpy's Investment Chat, Hidden Things in Front of Your Eyes, and ITM Trading. It would be greatly appreciated. Smash that like button, as it helps other people to be able to see this information in the YouTube algorithm flow. Pimpy, Lynette, I do appreciate you guys for this awesome economic roundtable conversation, and I hope that people thoroughly enjoyed today's roundtable, and I know we will do another one very soon. So on behalf of everybody, thank you for joining us. And as always, I encourage you to be the change by practicing change. And we are out.